The doorbell rang once, a soft, unsuspecting chime, and within minutes, one of the most violent crimes the city had ever seen unfolded behind the polished glass panels of an upscale home. For years, Evelyn Parker, 42, had been the picture of modern success. She owned a thriving real estate firm, managed a network of investors, and lived in a quiet, gated neighborhood on the west side of town. People admired her poise, her discipline, the way she seemed to glide through her days with perfect control. Her home reflected that same careful order. Cream-colored walls, fresh lilies on the counter, shelves organized with geometric precision. She lived alone, by choice, after ending a long and turbulent relationship 2 years earlier. Friends described her as private, but warm. Her employees saw her as demanding, but fair. No one seemed to know of any enemies, and Evelyn never mentioned feeling unsafe. The last person to speak to her was a colleague who called late that evening. The call lasted just a few minutes. The tone, according to the colleague, was completely normal. Evelyn was tired, ready to settle in for the night. She had a morning meeting scheduled and promised to arrive early, as always. But the next day, when she failed to show up, no texts, no calls, no explanations, concern spread quickly. Evelyn was meticulous. Punctual. Predictable. Silence wasn't like her. By noon, her assistant drove to the house, expecting to find a drained phone or a forgotten alarm. What she found instead would haunt her forever. The front door was closed, the lock intact. The house was quiet, still, almost too perfect. But inside, the rooms told a different story. A scene so vicious, so prolonged, that seasoned investigators later struggled to describe it without pausing for breath. There were no signs of forced entry. No shattered glass. No broken lock. Whoever had come to Evelyn's door, she had opened it willingly. Police quickly ruled out burglary, nothing was missing. Instead, the violence pointed to something personal, something deeply rooted. And with security cameras capturing fleeting images of a small car circling the block, and a figure lingering near the walkway, investigators began to suspect this wasn't spontaneous at all. This had been planned. As detectives dug deeper into Evelyn's life, they uncovered a complicated history that stretched far beyond her polished exterior, a history involving a former partner, hidden resentment, and a past lover who refused to accept the word goodbye. What emerged was not a single grudge, but a tangled web of obsession and loyalty that had been tightening around Evelyn for nearly 2 years. And at the center of it were two women whose bond, twisted by jealousy, secrecy, and control, would ultimately lead to the deadly night that ended Evelyn Parker's life. The investigation began the moment officers stepped inside Evelyn Parker's immaculate home. Nothing appeared disturbed except the area where the attack had taken place. It was as if the rest of the house had silently observed the eruption of violence, then returned to its pristine stillness. Detectives noted the details immediately, the faint scorch marks on the side of Evelyn's neck, the kind produced by a stun device, the absence of defensive wounds on her hands, the way her body had collapsed near the foyer, suggesting she had been struck down almost instantly after opening the door. Whoever had come for her had known exactly what they were doing. Within hours, police pulled footage from neighborhood security systems. One camera captured a compact, dark-colored car cruising slowly past Evelyn Street 3 separate times in less than 10 minutes. Another camera caught a lone figure walking along the sidewalk shortly before the estimated time of the attack. The figure moved with purpose, not wandering, not lost, as if waiting for a precise moment. Detectives needed to understand Evelyn's relationships. And it didn't take long before a name rose to the surface: Clara Mitchell, Evelyn's former partner. Their relationship had lasted nearly 6 years, ending in a messy breakup 18 months earlier. Friends described Clara as intelligent and passionate, but prone to mood swings and jealousy. After the separation, she had sent Evelyn long messages, alternating between apologies and accusations. But eventually the communication seemed to taper off. At least publicly. As investigators probed deeper, their focus widened to another figure from Evelyn's past, Lena Brooks, a woman she had briefly dated before Clara. The relationship had ended quickly, almost abruptly, 5 years earlier. According to Evelyn's friends, Lena hadn't taken it well. She had shown up at Evelyn's office once, unannounced, insisting they talk. After that, she seemed to disappear from Evelyn's life. But detectives soon realized Lena hadn't disappeared at all. She had simply gone silent. Phone records revealed something alarming. In the months leading up to Evelyn's death, Lena and Clara had exchanged dozens of calls, most lasting only seconds. Enough time to relay quick instructions, confirmations, or warnings, but brief enough not to attract suspicion. The more investigators uncovered, the more it became clear that Evelyn wasn't killed by a stranger. She had become the target of someone who knew her routines, her schedule, her habits, someone who had spent a long time preparing. But the real inciting incident, the moment the plot began, emerged from an unexpected discovery in Evelyn's garage. Behind a stack of paint cans, detectives found a thin layer of dust on the floor broken by a series of faint, circular scratches. The marks were subtle, but unmistakable, signs that something had once been attached underneath Evelyn's car. Something small. Something magnetic. A GPS tracker. The device itself was gone, but the scratches remained, proof that someone had been monitoring her movements long before the night she was killed. When technicians pulled Evelyn's cell tower records, the coincidence became unavoidable. Everywhere Evelyn had gone, Clara and Lena had gone too, though never together, never from the same phone. As the pieces began aligning, detectives sensed they were no longer dealing with a single obsessed former lover. They were looking at a partnership. A plot. One that had been building for more than a year and a half. Detectives now knew they were looking at a long-term operation, not an impulsive act of rage. To understand the scope of the plot, they began reconstructing the months leading up to Evelyn Parker's death, tracing every unusual event that, at the time, had seemed like nothing more than an inconvenience. The first major incident occurred 16 months earlier. Evelyn had returned home one evening to find her back door slightly ajar. Nothing was missing, nothing broken, no signs of forced entry. A sliding window latch appeared loose, as though nudged open from the outside. Police responded, examined the area, and concluded it was likely an accidental oversight. Perhaps Evelyn had forgotten to shut it fully. She accepted that explanation. She had no reason not to. But detectives now recognized the truth: the break-in had been a test run. The second incident was smaller, subtle enough to pass as a random gesture. A bouquet of cheap supermarket flowers had been dropped at Evelyn's doorstep with no note attached. Odd, considering Evelyn's friends always sent higher-end arrangements, and there was no occasion to celebrate. She had tossed them without a second thought. It wasn't a gift. It was reconnaissance, a way to see if she checked her door often, if she opened it without hesitation, if she examined unfamiliar deliveries. Clara and Lena had been planning even then. Witness accounts and phone analysis painted a clearer picture of their dynamic. Clara, once deeply intertwined in Evelyn's life, had never truly let go after the breakup. She spoke about Evelyn constantly to her closest friend, Lena, replaying old arguments, revisiting memories, lingering on grievances that should have faded with time. Lena, fiercely devoted and eager to prove her loyalty, absorbed every word. Over time, her sympathy hardened into something darker, a shared bitterness, a shared mission. What began as long conversations over coffee turned into whispered strategy sessions. What started as emotional support evolved into active complicity. Investigators uncovered hotel receipts from another city where Clara had purchased a stun device legally unavailable in their state. They discovered online orders made under Lena's name: gloves, dark clothing, removable license plate covers. Messages between the two women referenced practice runs and timing windows. Their diaries contained cryptic entries that, when placed side by side, formed a chilling map of intent. They had studied Evelyn's routine with precision, where she parked at work, how long she spent at the gym, which days she ordered groceries, when she walked her dog, even the nights she stayed late in the office. The GPS tracker, attached months earlier beneath Evelyn's SUV, had given them everything: timestamps, coordinates, speed, direction. Every aspect of her life had been digitally mapped and logged. Then came the night 2 weeks before the murder, when a neighbor's doorbell camera caught a small car idling at the far end of the cul-de-sac. The lights were off. The engine's hum was barely audible. After 4 minutes, the car rolled forward, stopped again near the corner, then disappeared. Clara's car. With Lena in the passenger seat. They weren't scouting the house. They were rehearsing. Their plan had only one missing piece: an alibi. And together, they built one with meticulous care. Lena arranged a visit to a friend hours away, timing her departure to align with Clara's planned arrival at Evelyn's home. Clara prepared receipts showing she had been at a hardware store the same evening. Both women used cash whenever possible. They avoided appearing together publicly for months. They believed they had created the perfect plan. Then, just days before the killing, they circled Evelyn's neighborhood one final time. A pedestrian camera caught Lena walking briskly down the sidewalk with her hood pulled low, glancing twice at the numbers on Evelyn's mailbox. A dry run for the entry. A confirmation of the timing. A final rehearsal before the attack. The night of the murder unfolded with a level of precision that made investigators pause. Every movement, every moment, had been orchestrated long before Evelyn even realized she was in danger. It began just after 9 p.m. Evelyn ended her work call, placed her phone on the kitchen counter, and walked toward the front hallway. She likely intended to lock up for the night, maybe pour herself a glass of water before heading to bed. Outside, the air was cool and quiet. The street lamps cast long amber streaks across her front steps. A figure approached from the sidewalk, calm, steady, rehearsed. The doorbell chimed. No forced entry. No hesitation. Evelyn opened the door willingly, expecting perhaps a neighbor, a delivery, or someone needing quick assistance. Instead, she was met with a burst of electricity from a stun device. Detectives believed the first jolt dropped her to her knees instantly. A second kept her from resisting. The attacker stepped inside, closing the door gently behind them, muffling the sounds to anyone passing by. What followed was a targeted, prolonged assault, driven more by emotion than by chaos. The brutality suggested personal rage, but the execution suggested planning. This wasn't a spontaneous eruption. It was the final step in a chain of decisions made over 18 obsessive months. But Clara wasn't alone that night. As investigators continued examining evidence, they discovered something unexpected: 2 distinct sets of shoe prints overlapping faintly near the walkway and in the mulch lining the front garden. The prints matched the tread patterns on 2 pairs of shoes later seized from the homes of Clara Mitchell and Lena Brooks. Both women had been there. While one confronted Evelyn at the door, the other lingered near the side of the house, watching for neighbors, keeping watch for lights flickering on across the street, ready to warn or intervene. The surveillance footage confirmed this. The small car seen cruising the block didn't leave immediately after dropping the attacker at Evelyn's home. It parked several houses away with its lights off. Detectives concluded that Lena remained in the car, communicating via short, coded calls. Meanwhile, Clara, moving on foot, approached the house. The attack itself lasted minutes, but the cleanup and retreat were just as deliberate. The killer avoided touching surfaces unnecessarily. They kept to areas previously tested during earlier reconnaissance visits: the porch railing, the door frame, the hall tiles. They brought their own tools and removed everything afterward. Even the stun device had been wiped clean before being discarded across state lines the following day. The women had planned not only the murder, but also their exit. Clara walked back to the waiting car. The footage, though grainy, showed the faint movement of the passenger door opening and the vehicle pulling away with measured calm. The car turned at the intersection, its altered plates concealed by small metal flaps that could be flipped up or down in seconds. By the time they reached the main road, the plates were fully visible again, returning the car to its standard appearance. The next morning, at 7:12 a.m., Lena was recorded at a cafe 2 hours away, chatting casually with a friend, establishing her alibi. Receipts showed she paid in cash. Clara, meanwhile, spent her morning running errands, acting as if nothing unusual had occurred. It might have worked, if not for the diaries. Found in separate apartments, the entries overlapped in chilling ways. Clara wrote about unfinished business and betrayal. Lena wrote about proving loyalty, about supporting what should have been done long ago. When placed side by side, the entries formed a timeline of thought, revealing simmering resentment, emotional dependency, and an escalating obsession with controlling the narrative of Evelyn's life. Phone records, once decoded, revealed dozens of deleted messages, reconstructed through cloud backups, detailing plans, concerns, and last-minute changes. One message from Lena to Clara read: "Tonight has to be smooth. No mistakes." Another from Clara: "Stay sharp. She answers the door quick. She always has." The evidence painted a clear picture. This wasn't just a crime of passion. It was a coordinated strike fueled by jealousy, resentment, and two minds feeding each other's darkest impulses. And now, detectives had enough to bring both women in for questioning. Detectives brought Clara Mitchell in first. She arrived with an air of indifference, as if she were attending a casual appointment rather than a homicide interrogation. Her hair was neatly tied back, her blazer pressed, her expression unreadable. She kept her hands folded in her lap and her posture perfectly straight, a picture of control. But the facade cracked within minutes. When detectives confronted her with the recovered phone logs, she blinked rapidly, her composure tightening. She denied everything at first, every message, every call, every piece of surveillance footage. She insisted she had no contact with Evelyn in over a year, and that she had spent the night at home watching television. Then investigators produced photos of the altered license plate flaps found in Lena's apartment. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes dropped to the table. It was the first tell. Meanwhile, Lena Brooks was being questioned in another room. Unlike Clara, Lena entered visibly shaken. Her hands trembled, and her voice wavered every time she spoke. Loyalty had bound her to Clara for nearly a decade, but fear had always been her shadow. And now that fear was overwhelming. When detectives showed her the diaries, side by side, Lena's breathing changed. Tears pooled. She asked for a moment. Then another. For nearly 10 minutes she sat in silence, staring at the pages that held her own words staring back at her. The breaking point came when they showed her the footprints in the soil, matched to shoes found at her home. Her voice cracked. "I didn't do it," she whispered. "I didn't touch her. I never stepped inside the house." Detectives didn't need her to. They only needed her cooperation. Once Lena realized Clara had told officers a completely different story, one that implied Lena had acted alone, something snapped. The years she had spent defending Clara, living in her orbit, absorbing her moods and her expectations, suddenly caught up with her. Lena leaned forward, folded her hands, and spoke in a whisper that barely rose above the hum of the room's fluorescent lights. "She planned everything. I just helped her watch." With that, the entire investigation shifted. Lena detailed the timeline, the surveillance, the rehearsals, the trip to purchase the stun device, the late-night drives around Evelyn's block. She described Clara's anger, sharp, controlled, relentless, the way she spoke about unfinished business, about the need to reclaim the narrative of their past. Clara was arrested an hour later. Lena, still trembling, was taken into custody as well. The trial. 8 months later, the courtroom was filled to capacity. Journalists filled every row. The public had followed the case for months, 2 women, 1 attack, a plot so intricate it felt almost unreal. Clara entered wearing a crisp navy suit, her chin lifted, her gaze steady. She maintained her innocence from the first moment, claiming Lena had acted independently, that she was being framed by a former friend desperate to save herself. Lena, in contrast, walked in quietly, her shoulders curved inward, her eyes avoiding the crowd. She had agreed to testify in exchange for the possibility of a reduced sentence, but her testimony was so detailed, so emotionally raw, that even seasoned attorneys paused to collect themselves. She described the nights spent driving slowly past Evelyn Street. She described the planning sessions, whispered, frantic, urgent. She described Clara's belief that Evelyn had ruined everything, that she owed her one last conversation, that she deserved a reckoning. Forensic experts followed with evidence, the matching footprints. The GPS scratch marks beneath Evelyn's car. The altered license plates. The diaries. The cloud-restored messages. The foreign-purchased stun device. Piece by piece, the timeline emerged in full, a mosaic of obsession. Clara never wavered. She denied every detail, even when confronted with her own handwriting. But the prosecution argued that her coldness wasn't strength, but calculation. A pattern. A familiar one. The jury took less than a day to reach a unanimous conclusion. Both women were found guilty. Clara received the longest sentence, a reflection of her leadership, her planning, her unwavering refusal to take responsibility. Lena, though seen as deeply involved, was given a slightly shorter sentence due to her cooperation. But even reduced, it was a punishment that would consume decades of her life. As the verdict was read, the courtroom stirred. Some wept. Some sat frozen. A few shook their heads in disbelief. Clara remained expressionless, staring straight ahead, her jaw set. Lena collapsed into tears. The courtroom doors closed behind them, leaving only the echo of what they had destroyed. In the months that followed the trial, the shock surrounding Evelyn Parker's murder never fully faded. Her neighborhood, once defined by quiet streets and manicured lawns, now carried a subtle heaviness, a reminder that danger can hide behind familiarity, and that the calmest exteriors can mask the darkest intentions. Evelyn's real estate firm held a memorial service for her, filling the hall with soft piano music and white lilies, her favorite. Colleagues spoke about her leadership, her kindness, and the way she always pushed others to aim higher. Former clients shared stories about her generosity, how she helped them navigate tough financial decisions or guided them through emotional home sales with patience and grace. For her family, the loss was immeasurable. They remembered her not as the headline victim of a calculated attack, but as a daughter who called every Sunday, a sister who never missed a birthday, an aunt who left encouraging notes on her niece's worksheets. They struggled with the knowledge that someone Evelyn once trusted, someone she had allowed into her life, had spent years plotting her death. The home where Evelyn died was eventually sold. The new owners filled it with different furniture, different colors, different memories. Yet longtime neighbors still felt a quiet ache when they walked past her former driveway, remembering the woman who waved every morning, who decorated her porch with seasonal wreaths, who seemed to have built a life of calm stability. As for Clara Mitchell, prison life stripped away everything she once controlled. The confidence, the poise, the polished image, all surrendered to the reality of long-term confinement. In the early years of her sentence, she filed multiple appeals, each arguing variations of the same claim, that she had been wrongly accused, that Lena had manipulated the narrative. All were denied. Her cell became her world, the walls closing in on a woman who had once believed she directed the world around her. Her silence became her only shield, a refusal to acknowledge the choices that had shaped her fate. Lena Brooks, serving her own lengthy sentence, lived a quieter existence behind bars. She kept to herself, attending therapy sessions offered by the prison, gradually unraveling the emotional dependency that had once tethered her to Clara. Staff reported she remained withdrawn but compliant, a shadow of the woman who had once believed loyalty could justify anything. Years later, she would finally admit, in a written statement, that she had spent nearly a decade molding her identity around Clara's approval. "It took losing everything," she wrote, "to see how far gone I already was." The community, meanwhile, struggled with its own reflections. How could two seemingly ordinary women foster such cold, calculated intention? How could resentment simmer quietly for so long without detection? It became a cautionary tale, one silently passed between co-workers, whispered about at neighborhood gatherings, mentioned in safety seminars and relationship workshops. Evelyn's story was no longer just a tragic crime. It became a reminder of how obsession grows, quietly, subtly, until it becomes something unrecognizable. Detectives who worked the case often revisited their files, especially the journals and messages exchanged between Clara and Lena. What struck them most wasn't just the violence of the final act, but the slow, deliberate build-up, months of planning that unfolded with chilling patience. It changed the way some officers viewed similar cases in the future, prompting earlier interventions, deeper investigations into harassment reports, more caution in dismissing minor incidents. Evelyn's family established a scholarship in her name for young women entering business programs. They wanted her legacy tied not to the cruelty of her final moments, but to the strength she embodied throughout her life. And slowly, though never completely, the city healed. In the end, Evelyn Parker's story is a haunting testament to how far jealousy can reach when fed by obsession, a reminder that even the quietest resentments can grow into storms when two determined minds choose destruction over letting go.